Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining us for this verbal reasoning workshop. I am always proud to introduce Louise Swan to you. Louise Swan is one of our tutors at Teach It Right. We were discussing before we came onto this session how long Louise has been with us, and I think we've worked out it's probably between 6 or 7 years that Lou's been with us. And if your child is with Louise, then I always think how lucky you are to have Louise as your tutor. Louise is very, very passionate about words, very passionate about English, very passionate about building up vocabulary. And I think for both of us, we realize that this isn't something that children can do overnight. This is something that needs to be gradually built up. But if you want your child to be successful with the 11 plus, and I'm sure you do, then vocabulary has to play a very large part in that preparation. And not only is it important that we build up vocabulary in the lessons, but we also need you on board with that word building as well. And one of the expressions that Lou uses is being word aware, and being word aware is really important. Louise will talk a lot this afternoon about that and how you make your child interested and engaged in vocabulary. So we'll start off by sharing the slides with you. So hopefully this will be easy for you to see. We've got very familiar with Smart Notebook. Certainly over the lockdown, this was something that became sort of part of our daily life, really. So we'll be running through a series of slides with you. And just to mention that we will be covering off different question types this afternoon. That will cover off questions that appear within a CEM exam. These are for students, of course, going for the Slough Consortium, potentially going for Kendrick. I know I'm also delighted to say that we do have some parents with us this afternoon that come from our centres in Birmingham. Jude and Mark run classes in Birmingham very successfully, and they've recently had a slight change to their syllabus, which is they do focus more so, those grammar schools now in Birmingham, on GL assessment rather than CEM. So we will be focusing on some GL question types as well, and we'll also talk about Reading Boys as we plod through this afternoon. What is interesting, I think, to realise, though, a lot of the question types, whatever exam boards, do actually overlap. So things like synonyms, antonyms, so closest in meaning, opposite in meaning, do appear across those different exam boards. And sometimes it's not always about being specific around the question types. It's really pointing out to you that actually it is about developing a good word knowledge. So whatever, however you do that and however we do that, it is going to have an impact on those question types that the children will see in their 11 plus. I think the other thing to talk to you about today will be a number of resources that you can access at home, that you can build around your child's 11 plus journey. And I think it's important to realise that there are lots of different products, materials that we can suggest to you. A lot of them we use within our revision camps, within our classes, but we also want to inform you about some of the best 11 plus products that we know are out there. We have used a variety over the years, some of which have worked incredibly well, and we think, wow, what an impact that had. Some we've actually used that don't feel that they have made such an impact on the children's learning. So I think hopefully this afternoon you'll get a flavour of that in terms of some of the apps, the websites, some of the books and things that we'll also suggest to you as well. If you did join a little bit later, I did say that if there is anything you want to ask Louise or I as we go through this afternoon, then do ask. Hopefully you've been sent a booklet that was sent out by Sandy Wyatt in the office on Friday. If you haven't got that booklet, just send an email to info@teachitright.com and we will ping you a booklet straight back. So you don't worry if you haven't received that yet. It could well be in your junk folder. Do double check that, but we will ensure you do get that booklet. It is about 50 pages long and it does cover off all the different question types that we'll look at this afternoon. So the agenda is to discuss some commonly asked questions in verbal reasoning, and Louise and I will do that together, and we'll talk to you about some of the questions we get asked very often about verbal reasoning and how to develop vocabulary. We will also be reviewing some of the question types and looking at some of the main ones. We've been sent some very comprehensive lists from some of our past students about some of the question types that even appeared in the exam that's just happened in September, so we can give you a bit of information around that, but also suggesting some games and activities that you can do at home. So we're going to begin with some commonly asked questions. So the first one is, what percentage of CEM and GL assessment, and we can also talk briefly about Reading Boys as well, is covered by verbal reasoning? So when we look at GL assessment, their children will actually do 2 papers. One paper contains English comprehension and verbal reasoning, and the other paper contains maths and non-verbal. So when we think of words, and we're linking that also to English comprehension and spelling and punctuation and grammar, then 50% of the exam is represented by word-related questions. And I'm also including that as English comprehension as well, because often in English comprehension, it may well say, what's a synonym for that word? Or what word group does that word appear in? Is it an adverb? Is it a preposition? So I guess really we are saying that 50% of the test is very much driven by vocabulary related questions. So that's for GL assessment. That's if you're taking the Buckinghamshire exam, and also if you are up in the Midlands, that is also something that we know is very, very comprehensive within their papers in terms of vocabulary. The CEM exam is also very much dominated by word-related questions. And one of the reasons that CEM, the Centre of Evaluation and Monitoring, which is now out of Cambridge University, previously out of Durham University, came on board was that they wanted to make children more word aware, to steal Louise's phrase there, but also they didn't want children going into the exam and just using a technique and being able to get the question right. They wanted children that were well read. They wanted children to have a good vocabulary. And that's certainly why CEM was introduced into the system probably 6 or 7 years ago now, in terms of when they came on board, because originally it was just GL assessment really was the dominant exam board, but CEM shook the system up a little bit, took out a lot of the code questions, took out a lot of the maths questions in verbal reasoning, and made it very much around how good is that child's vocabulary. Is their word knowledge strong? If so, they would do certainly very well in a CEM test. And that's carried on for the last 5 years, that if I could sort of talk about children that have got into Kendrick, got into some of those Slough grammar schools, then it certainly has been that they've shown a good knowledge of words. I'll hand over to Louise now, and we're going to look at another commonly asked question. Probably the biggest question that we get asked is number 2, Lou.
Yeah, how can I improve my child's vocabulary? There are lots of ways of doing it, but as Chris said, I do like that phrase word aware, because what happens with children is they get to a certain level of vocabulary they want, what they want to say, lots of situations with a basic vocabulary, but they don't always stretch themselves to use the richness of the language we have. And that's what I want them to do. I want them to notice when a word is used that they don't understand. So if I am teaching, I'll often deliberately slip a word into a sentence that they don't understand. And if nobody puts their hand up and says, what does that word mean? Then I will stop and I'll say, I've just used this word in this sentence. Do you know what it means? And usually they don't, but they haven't noticed it. So I'm trying to get them to notice when they don't know words and to ask about it. And they do start to do that, and they come quite excited when you get excited about their reaction. So lots of praise of, oh, I'm so glad you noticed that word. It's a really good word and it can do this and it can do that is really important. And it is really important that we start that now, because vocabulary is the one thing that we can't fix in a hurry. If somebody comes to us towards the exam and says we can't do percentages or something, we can do that, fix that very quickly, but vocabulary has to be worked on right from the beginning, and setting that attitude of it, if vocabulary is exciting, and listen to me using this word and see if you can use this word, is really, really important. So it almost becomes a family thing of trying to use different words to express ourselves. Reading is another really important thing. I always recommend 2 books on the go. One book that the children are reading for pleasure, and it can be easy, the sort of book, you know, when you go to bed at night and you've had a hard day, you just want to read your pleasure book, you don't want anything too challenging. But the second book should be a challenge book, where on every page there's 2 or 3 words that your child might not understand. They might eventually read some of that book themselves, but if you can read to your children for, say, 20 minutes 3 times a week from that challenge book, and you can encourage them, if it's not a precious book, I like to buy books from charity shops and things, and give children a pencil and say, if you're reading that and you come across a word we don't know, we'll just underline it and we'll look at it later. So reading a book with challenging vocabulary and looking how it works, asking questions about what's happening in the book, might expose that they do or don't understand certain vocabulary. So it's a really nice thing to do. The other thing that I try to do is, when a child does then get to the stage where they're saying, what does that word mean? What does that word mean? I try to avoid saying immediately, go and look it up in the dictionary, because what happens is they go to the dictionary and the dictionary uses words that they don't understand to explain the word that they don't understand, and they get very frustrated. So what I suggest is, when you do find a word that your child doesn't understand, that you tell a story around that word that they can relate to. So my favorite example is stubborn. If they don't know stubborn, I say, oh, have you ever seen a mum in the supermarket trying to put her child into the pushchair, and the child won't go in the pushchair and they won't bend in the middle, and everybody's getting cross because the child won't do what they're supposed to do? Then they are being stubborn. Once I've given that story, then I say, now we'll look up in the dictionary and see if the dictionary agrees with me, if the dictionary explanation fits the story. But next time they forget the word stubborn, and they will forget the word stubborn, then we can say, do you remember the baby in the pushchair? And immediately say, oh yes, they weren't doing what they should do. So those stories around words are really, really important. Also, we give the children a word and meaning book. It's very well documented that children, well, anybody, adults, try it yourself, find a word you don't know and see how long it takes you to actually learn it. But it's on average about 12 times that we have to hear a word before it actually becomes embedded in our vocabulary. So what we ask the children to do is to use the word and meaning book to record words that they don't know, and then they can revisit them the necessary amount of times. When I use a word and meaning book, I often don't take the book myself and say to the children, right, this is the word, what does it mean? And they have to tell me. I give them the word and they read the meaning of the word, and I have to try and find the word. It takes the pressure off it. They enjoy seeing you get it wrong. They enjoy seeing you struggle, and they feel that you're trying to learn along with them. So and as well, if you use boxes of cards, some people like to get the published boxes of cards and go through those. But if you're doing that, it's much better to put the pressure onto yourself, not onto them, and have fun. A word of the day is a nice idea as a family. If you say today's word is, and put it up on the wall on a piece of paper, and then challenge to see how many times somebody can use it, or you get a point if you're heard to be using that word correctly. And really what I'm trying to say is make the children excited about words by becoming excited about words yourself, so that they can see that you too are trying to increase your vocabulary and that you're there to support them. It's not just them and a dictionary. Is really, really helpful.
Thanks, Lou. I mean, those,
okay.
like you say, I think just infusing it, and fortunate enough to be in your room earlier at Gerrard's Cross, and going through compound words with the children, and actually their excitement about the fact that those two words, when they're joined together, does make a compound word. But as you said, being able to put those words into some sort of context and bring them to life is more likely to be remembered and retained. And I think also, just to sort of add to that, I think there's also an element around comedy as well, that if the word can be made interesting, made maybe a little bit funny, they are more likely to retain it as well. I always use this as an example, but one of the words I certainly, when I was at school, remember getting wrong multiple times was the word necessary, and not knowing how many C's and how many S's it had. And then the teacher did explain, well, why don't you think of one collar, two socks? So I thought of one C and two S's, and I never got that word wrong again. So just adding that element of interest, of maybe a little bit of comedy there as well, I think can help retain it. Question 3 says, what suitable games can be used to improve vocabulary? And I think as we go through this workshop, we'll explain a few more. I will just mention, though, and it sort of ties more into Louise's question above, is about the synonyms and antonyms dictionary, which is on the screen. This was a book that I only really stumbled across once I got into the 11 plus. And it really is a great book, because one of the things it does do is it gives lots of words that mean the same as another. It also, of course, gives the opposites as well, but very much tied into Louise's comment, where she said that when a child looks up a word in the dictionary, it can also have lots of words that can be quite convoluted, quite difficult to get their head around. Whereas with a book like this, they're bound to probably know one or two of the words that mean the same as the word they were looking up within that group of words. And it is a great book to use. This one happens to be an Oxford Dictionary of Synonyms and Antonyms. Synonyms and antonyms, and we'll come to these in a moment, certainly are one of the most popular verbal reasoning question type, not only from 11 plus, but things like CATS tests, ISEB tests. They do generally tend to use synonyms and antonyms as a way of testing the pupils. So may well be a book that you're interested in. In terms of games, then, there are websites, there are apps. We'll suggest those to you at the end of the workshop, and maybe you'd like to scribble those down, and they are in your booklets as well. But there are lots of games. I have one claim to fame, and I do mention this in the workshops, that I love Scrabble as a child, and I did actually become the Southwest Scrabble champion. It's about the only trophy I think I've ever won, but I did find Scrabble was a great game for me to play with family members, but also to develop my word knowledge. It helped me not only with spelling, but also learning the meanings of words, not only words that were very long, but also little words as well. And I know Louise talks a lot about this, that the 11 plus, yes, there are some long words that they need to know, but there's also a tremendous amount of tiny words that they need to know, 3-letter words that they need to learn, 4-letter words that they need to learn. And it is about developing the vocabulary around that. So just to give you an example, the word rove, R-O-V-E. How many children know that means to wander? Probably not that many. So it is about developing their vocabulary around little words, not just those words that are a bit more lengthy. I'll tackle question 4 if that's all right, Lou, because it's quite a short one, and then I'll hand back to you.
I think just add along with your Scrabble. When I was young, we didn't have so many games, and we relied a lot on pencil and paper. And that you can do a lot with pencil and paper. I played a game with the children last week where I took 10 words and I chose a synonym for each of those words, which I didn't tell the children. And then I gave them the 10 words and said they had to find a synonym for each of those words. But what I said to them was, if they had a different word to me, but it was a good synonym for the word, they got 1 point. If they had the same word as me, they got 2 points. Now, to get the same word as me was an element of luck. I said it's about words that you know, but there's also a huge element of luck. And that takes the pressure off the children who don't score so highly because of that element of luck. And quite honestly, in the 11 plus, there is an element of luck. So it was also teaching them to just have a go and see what your luck brings. So paper and pencil games, you know, where you say, well, let's think of how many words we can think of beginning with A and 4 letters with 2 O's in, or something like that. Or can we make a string of words where we start the next word with the end of the last word? All sorts of old-fashioned games like that, but they could be done in just for 10 minutes, but they all add to that knowledge.
Thanks, Lou. Yeah, I think, as you say, sometimes games can be just so simple, can't they? And I know there's a lot of games that we often use in the lessons and in revision camps, as simple as just writing a very long word on the board, like determination. How many words can you make out of determination? Or a word wheel. I remember certainly growing up on the back of the local paper, the Western Morning News, it was called. They always used to be a word wheel. And the idea behind a word wheel is that the child has to make as many words as they can, but they have to use the letter that appears in the middle of that wheel. And again, the challenge can be if you made 10 words, you might have been average. If you got 15 words, you were good, and it gradually built up. And it was quite good fun to see how far your vocabulary could be stretched.
And I think a lot of, sorry, Chris, I'm interrupting again. A lot of the vocabulary revolves around general knowledge. So things like names of flowers, names of animals, names of spices, baby animals, countries, capitals, all those sorts of things. So you can play games in the car. You know, let's have the alphabet and go around as we're traveling. You know, who can think of a country beginning with A? Who can think of a flower beginning with A? Who can think of a spice beginning with A, or a herb? All those things can be done orally, but it just adds to the knowledge bit by bit.
Thanks, Lou. Just on to question 4, and it's only just because it has come up previously and it was a valid question. Parents have asked, do they get the opportunity to take in a dictionary or word and meaning book into the exam? Unlike English GCSE, where I think certainly when my brother took his GCSEs, he was able to take a book in with him to support that exam and make notes in it. It isn't something you can do with the 11 plus. And I suppose one of the reasons why we want children to record down unfamiliar words, certainly in their word and meaning book, is so that they use that book as a revision aid, that the nearer they get to the exams, they can look back on those words that potentially they didn't know in September and October time, but hopefully they will know nearer the exam. And I think that is important to recognise that this is a year's journey we're going on. Yes, we come back to verbal reasoning, but it is about capturing those words that children don't know. And hopefully then, the more repetition we have, and as Louise says, you've got to hear it many times, hopefully they will remember it in their actual exam.
I think it's important to point out that children will never be asked in the exam to define a word. What they will be asked is to compare words and link words. So even if a child can't actually define the word, just a knowledge of where and when it might be used is often enough.
Thanks, Lou. No, I totally agree with that. I think in terms of these 2 questions, I'd certainly say we've covered off where we expect new words to be recorded. But I also think, just sort of connected to that children can also generate their own word lists that they could have on their wall, on a fridge. I love Louise's idea of sort of doing a word a day. How many times can you get that into conversation during the day? And you could, have some fun with that, seeing who can use it the most frequently. But certainly having a sort of an approach at home which praises up the use of good vocabulary. Conversational things also have a huge impact, that if you are able to sit together and have your meals, just having those conversations around new words and what words mean and does it have another meaning is incredibly powerful. It doesn't all have to be written down. It can be done orally as well.
I think if you can become aware of your own language and realize that we do the same as adults. Sometimes we use a simple word when we could find a better word. And my best example is when I used to teach Year 1 children who are only 5. If I was confused or I used to say to the children, I'm all discombobulated. Where's my glasses gone? Oh, I'm so discombobulated. And all of those children by the end of the year could use that word correctly. So if as adults we try to up our vocabulary, they'll start using those words. So I'm thinking of things like instead of saying, come down to the hall, it's time, get in the hall, it's time to go to school. Can you say, come on, we're going to assemble in the hall? Just slipping those words in. Without asking what they mean, just slipping them into conversation. We have them, but we sometimes forget to use them. It will help. Every little bit helps.
Thanks, Lou. The next question says, what is the best approach when using word lists with my child? Now, interestingly, I actually had a conversation with a parent this morning. This was a child that had just joined us in our centre, and the parent did say, oh, I see that my child's been given some word lists. How do we use them? And I thought it was a really good question, because it can be quite overwhelming when you're given a whole list of words, you know, across multiple pages. It's like, well, what do you expect me to do with these? And I said to her, well, I think probably the best approach from the outset, now you've got that list, is to actually get your child to go through the words with a highlighter and highlight all the ones that they know already. And there's bound to be lots of words within that list that they'll know. They'll know the meaning of, they'll know how it's used, and they'll feel very confident. They've got to be honest with themselves, but they go through, and actually it can give them huge confidence, because they can feel, well, actually, I do know a lot of words, but the ones that they're not highlighting, those are the ones that you hone in on. Those are the ones that think, actually, I've got to try and find a way of my child knowing what that word means. And that can be a really good way of approaching word lists. This also led into a bit more of an in-depth conversation about the types of words that are in the 11 plus. And we talked a little bit about the fact that the 11 plus words that are chosen for the exam are what I describe as being 11 plus appropriate. They're not really easy. If we talk about something like antonyms, I'm sorry to say, but it's not going to be hot and cold. That's not going to come up. A word for hot may be something more like, I don't know, sweltering, something a little bit more complex. But what we've got to realize over the years is there are certain words that do feel very much 11 plus appropriate. And that's why those words appear within the books that we use, but it's also how we construct things like word lists, how we also drag in words into the lessons that we know have potentially come up in the past. And I think that's important to recognize. These words are not ridiculously hard, but they are very much around the kind of words that we would expect children to be able to get their head around and understand. And as we go through the year, say, we feed those in, we bring those into the lessons, and we share with you as well the types of words that we expose the children to. So that would be my approach to using a word list. And then it's all about, can you do some games linked to that? And the suggestion there in question 6 is maybe some matching games can be good fun. Simple as just writing, words on a little piece of paper and then turning them all over and then trying to match them up. Who gets the most pairs at the end? You know, very simple, but actually very effective. Children to have a bit of fun while they're also learning words. And maybe once they've got a pair, they've got to be able to tell you what those words mean to keep it, or something along those lines. Anything to add to that, Lou, in terms of word lists?
No, I very much like your idea of the highlighters, because it gives them visual evidence of them learning. They really do respond to that. They can see themselves learning by the colours. It
is something actually that I know Paula Hobden, one of our colleagues, she actually will do that in their books as well, is sort of go around and highlight words that they don't know that they can add into their word and meaning. But again, it's all about finding good strategies that help children hone in on those words that do need more attention, as we said earlier. Right,
I think a very sorry, Chris, a very small thing is, but sometimes if I have time and they've got to put a word in their word in meaning book and the class has moved on, I will put the word in for them and write the meaning in for them, because it's quite arduous for them to have to keep writing them in. And it's that feeling, if, oh, mum was going to record that for me, so I haven't got to do that. It's a tiny little bit of strain, but it gives them that feeling of that you know, mum and dad are with me here. They're helping me do it. They feel that support. Just a small thing like that is helpful.
Thanks, Lou. I have just put in the chat just a list of just some of the word games that we love sort of recommending: Scrabble, Boggle, Bananagrams, Word on the Street, great game, and Whiz as well. Whiz Match is a great game as well. So again, just a few there that you may want to just make a note of. We are now going to get into some word questions and we're going to go through them. We're actually going to alternate. Louise is going to take one. I'm going to take one. If you do want to refer to your booklets and you've got your booklet printed out and you're really well organized and you're sat there with it, then obviously this is a great opportunity to go through these questions with us as well. I will present the questions on the slide. So if you would rather just have a pen and paper and just jot some of them down, it's always quite nice, I think, if you have a go at some of the questions yourselves, because we always talk about empathy, don't we, Louise? And
yes,
this is what these workshops are often about. So we're going to jump, as I say, straight into the first question type, which is synonyms.
Okay, so synonym or closest in meaning. It is important that they know it's closest in meaning, not always exact. So the first example is where they have to select the word that means the same as the word on the left. So the way we do that is look at the word rigid, think about, do you know what it means? Even if you don't know exactly what it means, can you think of a time where you've had to use that word or you've heard that word used? Can you work out what it might mean from that? Then compare it with each one of the options. So does rigid mean flexible? Which clearly it does. If that's not the answer, go to the next one, and so on. Compare with each one, thinking about it. Be very careful not to choose an antonym. In every synonym question, they will usually put an antonym. And in every antonym question, they will usually put a synonym. So for rigid, I almost did it then myself. Rigid is an antonym to flexible, so we'd eliminate. Harnessed, eliminate. Lean, I would often point out there that word can have two meanings, but neither of them mean rigid. Biased also, and you're left with stiff. So elimination is really important, because if they get to the point where they've eliminated 3 and they've got 2 left, at least they've got a 50-50 chance. So elimination is really very, very important. And then, as Chris is illustrating, putting that word into a sentence so that the children can put that story into their mind by using and get the word in their mind by using the story next time. But elimination is extremely important. I always say, don't panic if you don't know a word. It is obviously really difficult if you don't know the word that you're presented with, which in this case was rigid. But if you don't know a couple of the words in the options, you can still give yourself a pretty good chance of getting it right by eliminating and guessing in at the end. So you've got 20 here for yourself to have a go at. Be careful that you don't choose an antonym. It's very easy to do, as I've just shown, and see how you go. What would you say, Chris? 3 a minute, or
I think
a minute even?
Yeah, I think just a couple of minutes, guys, to have a go at those. As I said earlier, you can either do it directly into your booklet, just scribble them down if you want to. Just but one other thing exam, that sorry, I will just add on to what you were saying there about sort of strategies. It is very important that, and we would teach children this, that when we're doing closest in meaning, we look at verbs going with verbs, adjectives going with adjectives, adverbs going with adverbs. So word groups need to be the same. So I don't think there are many examples where that doesn't happen, really, Lou, are there? To be honest.
But it is really important that they get to grips right now with how they understand that something is a verb or an adjective or an adverb and so on, because it is a help in a lot of questions, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So really important.
We'll be quiet for just a few minutes or so, let you have a go, and see how many of them you can get right. It's worth just mentioning here that at the top, of course, it says a CM style question, and the reason we've put it like that is because CM often put a word on the left and then they required to find the word that means the same. If it was a GL assessment question type, and I think we may have a few maybe to share with you in a moment as well, they would have 3 on the left, 3 on the right, and then you take 1 from each set of brackets. The Reading Boys exam had a very similar type of layout in terms of the word appeared on the left, but actually they only had 4 options. So that, again, it can vary, but I suppose the principle behind all closest to meaning is the same. Your child has to identify which words are closest. What the format and what the layout is can vary year on year and isn't something we've got control of, I'm afraid. But of course, what we hope is our students go into the exam having a very close knowledge of words. I wonder, Lou, whether we do go down through now, because
just about to say, it's the principle that matters. Exactly. I did forget to mention, and I think it's worth me saying now, I'm sure in doing this, you've realised to be careful about words that are related to the word you're given, but actually don't mean the same thing. There just is a relationship between them. Those are easy to misunderstand and to choose too quickly. The other thing is to notice that words have more than one meaning, and you have to be careful of that. So in number 1, where you've got spring, if you immediately think of it as a season and you're stuck with that idea in your head, then often it will cause a child a problem because they can't find a synonym, because they can't relax and think of a different option for the word spring. So Chris has done the first one. The second, clutch, I would think, okay, where might I have heard that word? Oh, yes, I clutched the flowers in my hand. Grasp. Hinder is impede. I love the story I always tell for that one. I always talk about someone running a race with a wooden leg and that they're impeded or hindered by their wooden leg. That always, as Chris says, a little bit of humour helps them to remember it. Quota, allowance. But we would encourage the children to eliminate, as Chris has done. Obey, comply. Quick is brisk. And again, brisk is a word we would tend to use for perhaps walking, going for a brisk walk. So again, trying to get the children to think, where might that word be? Oh yes, a brisk walk would be a quick walk.
It's interesting, Lou, isn't it? Even in those first 6 questions, actually the amount of antonyms there.
Yes.
Yeah,
There's always an
assist
antonym.
and hinder, sluggish and quick. They're there to try and throw them off the scent a bit.
Yeah, and it's easy. We have had children, have we not, who've got a 20 like this, and they've got halfway down and forgotten they're doing synonym and chosen all the antonyms. So that is something we do warn them about, to keep checking that in their head they're doing the right thing. We will often say, if you're doing antonyms, write antonyms at the top of the questions. If you're doing synonyms, do the same, and keep referring and thinking, am I doing the right one? So there, Chris is just giving you a reminder of homophones. So sometimes they will put both homophone in and they've got to choose which one. So spelling, again, spelling pops into a lot of questions that you don't actually have to spell the word, but you have to have an understanding of the spelling of the word and other words in order to do it. So naughty is unruly. Again, you can see how you can use words yourself. If you notice that, you could say, stop being so naughty, stop being so unruly. And I like to point out to the children that naughty is a very wide synonym. It covers lots of situations. Unruly tends to be used when children are moving and not sitting still or making a lot of noise. So although they're synonyms, there is a great richness in our language. And I think when you point out the slight difference between the synonyms, where they might be used, children really respond to that. There you go. Hope you got 20 out of 20.
Thanks, Lou. Sorry, I've whizzed through those, but I think, again, these are questions, of course, you can use with your children as well. We often say this in workshops, that you've got the booklet. If you want to have a go, see how many they would have got right, then you can always do that. I mean, obviously have a lot within their book, certainly that blue synonyms and antonyms book. We appreciate a lot of words, maybe a lot of words that actually the children don't know, but that's all part of that word building process. It's nothing to make them feel deflated about. If they don't know them, that's fine. They're hopefully going to learn them and build up their vocabulary beyond belief, really, in terms of the amount of words they will know by the time that we finish with them. Just very quickly,
sorry, I was going to say, I hope this is giving to parents, though, a real understanding already of how much you can do in just your day-to-day speaking. That one with thaw and melt we had recently, and a lot of the children really didn't know that when mom took stuff out the freezer, that it was coming out to thaw. They just said it was melting. So if you think about the words you're using, you can really do a lot to help children just day to day.
I think my son would just think about Thor with the big hammer.
Yes.
Just moving on, guys, this is what I was sort of explaining earlier, that GL assessment tends to use a slightly different layout with their closest in meaning. They have 3 words on the left, 3 words on the right, and then you need to check. I'm not going to go through necessarily all of them here, but you can just see here, waste and squander. Again, getting them to understand the meaning of those words, talking about the word hoard. What does hoard mean? Well, that means the opposite when you're sort of gathering lots of things together, and you're a hoarder because you collect newspapers or whatever it might be. So again, just having a look down through loiter, dawdle, those kind of things, some tricky vocabulary, but laid out slightly differently. The reason I've shown you on question 2 the crossing out is, again, just to show you that process of elimination. And Louise emphasized it in those synonyms up there. Crossing out the wrong answers just to leave the right answer can be a really good strategy. And we'll talk about that forevermore, because we'll mention that a lot when we do non-verbal, eliminating the wrong ones to leave the right one. And we also talk about that in terms of maths and English comprehension as well.
I think it's worth noting that some of the words, I just noticed they're swindle. Quite a lot of the words are not used so much these days. And I think that's another good reason to read literature that is not just contemporary, but some older literature as well, where they may come across words like swindle.
Thanks, Louise. Just tied into this, and Louise will talk a little bit more about this, one of the ways that synonyms can be presented is actually to have missing letters. And this also appears within Reading Boys as well. If we think of a closed test for CEM, but also Reading Boys, they had sentences this year with letters given, but then spaces they needed to fill in. So it all very much ties into the type of question that may be presented whereby those letters are omitted. So I'm sure Louise will talk to you a little bit about some of the clues here, but actually insert the letter is another way of presenting synonyms.
This is one of the types that the children do find most difficult. So as you can see, first we suggest you read the word on the left, really think about what it means, if not, and where you've heard it. If you don't know what it means, just think, where have I might have I've heard it or seen it written even, because that will help you to stay calm. Don't panic if you don't know words. I always say to children, don't panic, use your intuition. And they get used to that word, and it gives them a little bit of confidence. If I don't know the word, I've got my intuition. So look at what the word means. Oh, can I put it into a sentence? Yes. Oh, it's so tranquil and peaceful lying here. And there we are. We've got peaceful straight away. If not, if you still can't get it, look at the letters. FU at the end is almost certainly going to end with L. So then you can say, oh, it's so tranquil sitting here. It's so full. And you can hear I'm sounding the P and the K, the curly K. I'm saying full. And often by doing that, the children will fit it in. Then is going to be vowels after the P, at least one. So it's thinking about what letter patterns do we use in English, and applying that knowledge and blending those letters that you do have together. Once again, I'll say it again, if you say full, it almost gives you the word, but children need to practice doing that. And as Chris is pointing out, getting your spelling correct.
Not the piece of cake. And
Yeah.
It is amazing how many children would add in the wrong letters there because they're not quite sure on how it's spelled. We've got a set here which are in your booklets. I do find these quite sort of puzzly and gamey, to be honest, and they're just good fun and so easy to make up as well, that you can make up a set of these easily enough yourself. You know, just grab yourself a dictionary and play around with some of the letters. It's good fun. Would you like to have a go at these 10? I'll leave them up on the screen for you. See if you can fill in the gaps. See if you can make sure that the word that you've created is a synonym to that word on the left there. And then we'll whiz down through the answers.
Yeah, the writers are very clever, aren't they, at putting in a question that could have another word that could go there, but not be a synonym.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the children
Number 2 is a
get very
perfect example. Yeah. Number 2, I will just tell you, it isn't sweep, even though you can put sweep in there. Have a go, guys. See how you get on.
I would also say that number 8, the children find the most difficult.
Oh, yes. We were talking about that word today, actually, weren't we? The first part of that word. Right,
yes.
we will be quiet. Not yet, but what would be nice, actually, guys, just to make sure you're still with us and we haven't bored you, perhaps typing some of those answers in the chat in a moment. This is just to make sure that you're not, doing something else while you should be listening to us. But if you'd like to have a go and just type them in the chat, you can. Don't do it yet because we don't want to give away the answers too quickly. We'll let you stew on them a little bit longer. See if you can get 10 out of 10.
We do often tell the children if they're struggling with the spelling to try writing the word on their question paper, because once you see it, again, there's not a formal spelling test in the exam, but just being able to look at a word and see that it's correct or incorrect.
In all my jesting there, Lou, I certainly remember a few years ago speaking to a parent towards the examination, and he said that a lot of the papers that his child was doing at home, certainly over August, he was actually doing at the same time as his child. And how powerful that was, that actually the enjoyment that child got from the fact that actually mum or dad was sat there, or even a relative or someone there, a friend, doing it at the same time, how much they enjoyed that. And I think that's something to emphasize again about word building, that don't just feel that it's all about your child developing their vocabulary. You're going to be building your own vocabulary as well. And I've spoken to a lot of parents already this year who've been very honest with me and said, I've been looking up those words as well to make sure I know what they mean. And that's great. And that should be celebrated, I think.
And I think we have vocabulary that we don't use. That's what I'm trying to say is you have the vocabulary there, but day to day we forget to use it. It's pulling it out yourself.
Yeah.
But they do love to do something with you and see you get it wrong and them get it right. And it's so important because it gives them confidence that I do know stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Fantastic.
I've
listed a couple of games in the chat, sort of a Scrabble and board games and things, but someone's put a really good question in the chat, which is, could you give us a list of some games that you'd suggest families can play in the day-to-day routine, please? So I'm gonna throw that at you, Lou, actually, and just sort of any games that people could sort of use throughout the day that could help develop vocabulary.
I think anything that's oral, as I've said, sitting in the car when you go for a walk. Can you name that? Can you tell me what word you would use to describe the clouds? And then when they've done theirs, you do one as well. So little adjectival phrases to describe something, or actual factual things. We were talking about going down, we had the word merge the other day, and the children didn't know what merge meant until I said the roads merge. So if you were in the car, you can look out for words yourself, but you can play things like, okay, we're walking along, let's do flowers. How many flowers can you name? I'll name a flower, you name a flower till we run out. And so those sorts of things, words that come into everyday life, just do them as you're walking along, as you're driving along, talk about the vocabulary. Children like those quick, short games, rather than, it doesn't always have to be pencil and paper.
While you're talking, Louise, what is interesting for you, just looking at the screen, and whoever is Asma, I'm assuming it's a child, actually filling in the answers for us before we've got to them. But Asma, well done, and I certainly would. Oh, you're deleting them now. I've scared you off. You were doing a great job, actually, getting those right. So well done. Oh, you're having another go. If you like, who is ever scribing on the screen, if I fill them in only because I can draw with my little pen, just so they're a little bit smaller letters. But in the chat, if you do want to type any of the words, you are more than welcome to do that. So Asma, sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there just for the moment. Otherwise, we won't be able to see the letters on the screen. But great effort. Well done. Some really good answers there. Right. Let's go through them really quickly. Lou, do you want to yell them at me?
Yes. So abandon is leave. And can I just point out that lovely strategy of putting it in a sentence? I had to abandon my car at the side of the road because it broke down. I had to leave my car. So using the sentence really helps. Abolish and scrap.
That was a tricky one, we thought, didn't we? Yeah.
It was. Abrupt and sudden. Ailing and sick. The word sick isn't difficult, but ailing, of course, is. And that's where they can use their word knowledge. Adapt and change, accuse and blame, attain and achieve. The IE can lose the marks if they don't know the spelling. Attach is hard. Think of a coat if you didn't get it. Fasten.
It is interesting with that achieve, isn't it? That
yes.
Often the I and the E will be the wrong way around there.
Yes.
Doesn't quite
Fasten.
fit the rule.
So you can see how if you just think of attach and you don't think of lots of different occasions where you attach, that can be hard. Author, writer, and award, trophy. Again, if you got 10 out of 10, well done.
Fantastic. Well done, guys. Yeah, some people typing in the answers really well there. Fantastic. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for that. Thank you for that suggestion on sort of games to play during the day. And I think Louise is absolutely right. I think it's trying to use the world around us a little bit more, and naming types of trees, plants, all that thing. And that fits very much into one of the question types that we will look at today, which is called Odd One Out. So thank you very much for doing that. Thank you for being so accurate within the chat feed. Some great answers there. Well done. You can give yourselves a big pat on the back. Some good answers there. Right, I am going to move on to the next one. Asma, I don't know if you can delete the lettering that you've got on the screen. That would be great, but well done for having a go at that. If you can just delete your jottings. I can't delete it because it's your writing, but if you are able to delete that, that would be much appreciated, please. Otherwise, that's all we'll see for the rest of the slides. I don't know if I can text you, Asma, directly. Please remove lettering. That would be great. Thank you very much. So I'm going to move on to antonyms now. I won't spend too long on this because I think really we've actually covered quite a few of the strategies in synonyms, but antonyms tends to be the one that I think certainly children do find one of the most challenging question types. I've always tried to get my head around why children find antonyms harder than potentially synonyms. And my only sort of link to it is to say, well, in a classroom setting, when children are writing stories or they're doing their work, the teacher will often say, oh, you've used that word a number of times to describe someone. I don't know. Let's imagine they've used the word old 5 times in a piece of writing. They'll say, well, can you think of a word that means the same as old? Ancient, or elderly, or something that describes whatever they were describing as being old. Well, they're synonyms. You're asking the child to think of other words that they know that mean the same, but they very rarely say, well, put in an antonym in its place. It's just unlikely to happen. So that's the only link I can make, but certainly they do find antonyms more challenging. But back to what we were saying earlier about trying to find clues within words. So we've got an example here, got the word abundance. I think of lots of buns. I like eating lots of buns, therefore abundance contains the word bun and it means a lot of, an abundance of something. And the opposite, of course, we've got there is a scarcity of something, not having very much of it. Now, what we tend to find with these kind of antonyms as well is how do we record those down? Because usually within the word and meaning book, we're putting synonyms or we're defining what that word means. But again, it's certainly worth looking at the antonyms lists that we've provided for you at Teach It Right, but also creating maybe a list of antonyms yourself as well. And I will just go back to the slide that we did look at right back at the beginning of the workshop. We did talk about this one, didn't we? That actually the antonyms are brilliant in here within that dictionary for children to develop that knowledge as well. Asma, sorry, I will ask again, I don't know if you are there or you can hear me, if you can delete those letters on the screen, I would appreciate it. It will impact later on as well as we go down. So I've emailed you directly, but if you can hear me or the parents can hear me, please do remove those letters. And I can't do that because you've obviously written on the screen. Okay, so we have got, again, a similar sort of thing whereby we have the insert the letters for these antonyms as well. And again, when we come to GL assessment, the way that it would be laid out is to have 3 words on the left, 3 words on the right, and your child would select 1 letter from each. Okay. I know and appreciate I've whizzed through antonyms reasonably quickly, but I think, as you can imagine, it very much ties in with synonyms. We are going to move on to the next question type now, which is compound words. And I'm going to hand back to my good friend Louise to go through compound words with you.
Okay, compound words are great fun. We've been doing them today and the children really enjoy them. You have 3 words in the first set of brackets, 3 words in the second set of brackets, and you have to choose 1 word from each set of brackets, put them together and make a new word. The first set of brackets must be the first word, the second must be the second, and you can't rearrange the letters. So the strategy is to read the words in both sets of brackets. Again, never panic. Never panic if the child, to the children, I say to the children, if you don't know the words, don't panic. You may not need to, it may be fine. If you don't see the answer immediately, check the possible combinations. That means, so take the first word from the first set of brackets, which is top, add it to each of the one in the third. So top tile, toppable, and top list. If that doesn't work, cap tile. Now, if they say cap able, that's a problem. Cap list. And then hat tile, hat able, hat list. As I said, if they stick on saying cap able, it's a problem. So what we teach the children is to notice that there are changes in stress on the words or changes in the vowel sounds. So cap able becomes cape because the able gives it puts an E on the end, which turns cap to cape. And it's capable, able. So we get an sound instead of the A. So whenever I do that, I point these out so that the children can actually notice what's happened and understand how that can often happen. Not always, but it can happen. If they are stuck, move on. And then if you have time, go back to the tricky ones and write the options, because often if you said cap and able to the children, they wouldn't be able to see it, but immediately they write it down, they'll read the word capable and they go, oh yes. So the more they do of these, the more they begin to understand the strategy. There is also, if you see at the bottom, there is a little snip of a multiple choice sheet. The multiple choice gives the options that they can have, and that narrows it down. So if they try to answer the question from the multiple choice sheet rather than from the question paper, that will help them. So have we got some to have a go at, Chris? Oh, it's disappeared. Oh, there we go.
Sorry, Lou.
Okay.
Yeah, we have. I don't know, Asma, I don't know if you can hear me, who's ever under. If you can remove those letters from the screen, I would appreciate. I have tried to text you, but it may be that you're not checking your chat. Unfortunately, I can't disable it. I can disable it now that you can't write on there, but if you could rub out those letters on the screen, then that would be appreciated. I have asked you to unmute yourself a few times, so if you could do that for me, that'd be much appreciated. So Lou, yeah, there are a few examples there.
If you just before you start that, I can also mention emphasis on words. If you had the words for and bid, and you made forbid, if the children did that, they'd probably go forbid, and they wouldn't hear it. So what I point out to them is when you say forbid, the emphasis is on the for. If you change it and put the emphasis on bid and say forbid, then you can hear the word. And I actually today in class asked them to say for me forbid and forbid, because when I was talking about emphasis, they didn't quite understand, but when I made them do it, they could. So that's also worth pointing out if you ever come across one. So there you go, 10 more, off you go. There's a few nasty spelling tricks hiding there. Are we ready, Chris?
Yes, Lou. Yeah, we can certainly go through those now.
Yes, there's quite a few things to point out there. So the first one, tracksuit, pretty straightforward, tracksuit. Second one, hopeless. Again, pretty straightforward. Third one, database. I think the tricky one about that is if they don't know the word database. But apart from that, that was pretty straightforward. Next one, overtake. The next one is tricky because we've got, it can be permit or permit. And it might be that they understand permit, but say permit, or it might be they understand permit, but not permit. So there's that stressy thing. The next one is a really good one because it's actor. And if they say actor, they often can't get it because that or turns to actor. So 7 is hard because heart becomes heart. They need to see that written often. Fat and her becomes father. So there's a sneaky one with the TH becoming the. Impact is not so hard, but they may not know it. And the last one, patriot, is difficult if they don't know the word. So there's quite a lot of snags in those.
Thanks, Lou. Yeah, compound words are tricky. Sometimes, of course, as Louise was saying, they don't phonically go together, so they don't work. So if you think of like, feet and her, blend them together and you get feather. Sometimes where the word splits, and I sometimes find compound words can be a little bit hazy in their definitions, but something like redraw could be red and raw, but where do you actually split it when you say it? You don't go red raw, you go redraw. So again, it's sometimes a bit complicated, but again, there are lots of lists out there. We've got multiple compound word lists that we will use with the children over the course of the year, but there are again lots online. If you just type 11 plus compound words, there's some really good lists there for you to have a look at. And one of the things that Louise and I were talking about today actually was that you can think of, there's lots of games you can play with compound words, where you come up with a word, let's say like back, for example. How many words can I link with back that are compound words? Well, I can think of backlog. I can think of background. We can have a good game with that. There are lots of words that you could tie in with that particular word. Okay. Going to move on now to another question type, which is more GL linked. Louise is actually going to do the alternative to this one. We often sort of talk about swap 2 words and also reshuffled sentences, but I'm going to look at swap 2 words with you now and just to talk to you a little bit about how it is presented. So the example that we've got here at the top of the screen, I'm just going to make that a little bit smaller and just make this a little bit bigger so you can see what I'm talking about. So swap 2 words. What do we have to do? Well, in each sentence, 2 words have to change places for the sentence to make sense. Select the 2 words, underline the 2 words which need to swap places. When you start with a question like this, the first thing to do is to actually read it as it's written, because we need to kind of put everything into context a little bit. So we've got the problem of skilled workers is becoming an increasing scarcity. We actually had scarcity, didn't we, earlier? So again, you might want to talk about any words that a child doesn't know, just to help them with a few definitions. But it's about swapping 2 words over that will make that sentence make sense grammatically. So we are looking at the scarcity of skilled workers is becoming an increasing problem. Now, again, just swapping those 2 words over will make that sentence make sense. But by reading it initially, it will give us a really good idea of the context of what should be happening. And that's the way we want children to do it. Sometimes with questions like this, and the word we often use within the classroom, the words we use in the classroom, is a bit of trial and error, that sometimes you can swap the 2 words over and just see whether it works. And that again can be a way of doing it. How do examiners make these more tricky? Well, of course, they increase the words harder to understand. So this is one that we would like you just to have a little look at and a go at. Why don't we, now I've just noticed here, we've actually given you the answers. Maybe in actual fact, why don't I just reveal those down there like that? Again, apologies about the lettering. I have asked that student to remove the lettering, but they've either left us or can't get through to them. But again, within your booklets, there are lots of examples in the appendix which you can have a go at in your own time and play around with. But just to pick out a couple of these, number 3 there, reliance. Again, not an easy word for a child to know. And again, there will be words within there. Reservoir is an interesting one. Number 4, does the child know what a reservoir is? And again, lots of discussions can happen around there. But again, it's all about swapping those 2 words over so it does make sense. I will just point out number 6, because it uses the word tomorrow. I've often seen with these kind of questions, words that use things like yesterday, today, tomorrow, again, just to confuse them a little bit about which ones would work in context and make sense. So again, children have really got to get their head around what would make sense within that sentence. I think that's all I need to say really on swap the 2 words, Lou. It's not really come up actually.
No, the only thing I would say is what it does test, I think, is whether the child, when they're reading a sentence, is actually thinking about what the sentence is saying.
Yeah.
So if you take 12, the whistle blew his referee at full time, they've swapped 2 nouns. So grammatically, those words can fit there because they're both nouns, but it doesn't make sense. A whistle can't blow. And if the child is not really thinking of what that sentence is saying, it's going to take them longer to identify the words.
Exactly. So, yeah.
I would say, what is the sentence? Think of the meaning as a full sentence, not just the words.
I agree. Someone has just asked within the chat whether we could share these slides. I am more than happy to do that. All I've really done, though, just to sort of let you know how these have been put together, is I've very much cut out it's a bit like chopping it up into little bits from the Parent Workshop booklet, and I've placed them into the slides. But I am more than happy to have a go at I can convert it into a PDF. One of the problems we may have with that, and I will just mention that once you convert it into a PDF, it can still be a very large document that can be quite difficult to email over. I will give it a go. It might be that we use something like WeTransfer for you to open it up. But yes, we will certainly send those over as a PDF as well. Right, I will move on now to, I think, one of the most unusual question types within the 11 plus, something called reshuffled sentences. And Lou is certainly a bit of a master at these. These ones do come up in CEM. They are very much part of a CEM exam, don't appear within GL. The GL version was swap the words, and don't really appear actually within a Reading Boys test. It's not one that we think that they will draw upon, but certainly if you are going for Kendrick or the Slough Consortium, this is the one for you.
I really like these a lot. I enjoy them. I think you either love them or hate them. They're a bit Marmite. What you get, if you look at the example, is a collection of words that can make a sentence. One of the words is not necessarily, it's superfluous. So you have to rearrange the words and then find the superfluous words. So the strategy is, first of all, just read the whole thing, the whole sentence, jumbled up as it is, and see what springs to mind about which words can go together. So allowed, slipping, swimming is not the around running pool. It would immediately come to me that swimming is not allowed, but it doesn't always come to everyone. So the next thing to do is think about who's doing the action, because every sentence must have a verb and must have something or someone who's doing the verb. So I would look for the verb, which in this case is swimming. Could be running or could be swimming. So it's either running or swimming is not allowed. So we've got is not allowed. The verb is actually, is. And then it's got the negative is not allowed. And it's going to be around the pool. So it's going to be the running that's not allowed, not the swimming. Often the word which is not required does have an association with the sentence. but it can't fit anywhere to complete it. So slipping, you could slip by the swimming pool, but that word just won't go into the sentence. So look for the thing or the person doing the action and look for the verb. The children do get a bit confused because is, as, am, was, and were are all verbs. They come from the verb to be, and that's our most used verb in our language. And so it appears often. So I actually just do teach them that am, as, was, were, are verbs. So if Chris can put a few up, I'll give some, I'll do a couple more so that you can see the strategy. Striking out is a really good idea. So if you look at whether she, under today, umbrella is feeling, the verb is. Who is? Well, she is. So strike out she is. And then I'm thinking she is what? She is feeling. How is she feeling? Under the weather today. And I'm left with umbrella. But of course, umbrellas goes with under. So that's quite confusing. I'll do one more and then I'll leave you to do some. So the verb is were, I think. So long ship, what were? Long ships were. So I think we've got long ships were.
Lawrence!
Were built. And what were they built for? Long ships were built for exploration, both exploration and warfare. Now we're left with Viking and warrior, but of course we can fit in Viking because we can say Viking longships, and we're left with warrior. So that strike out is really important. I always advise them to strike out one way, as Chris has done, and then if it goes wrong, you can try again by striking the opposite way. So sort of making a cross. That gives you another go. I do tell children, don't, for goodness sake, scribble it out, because if you scribble it out, you can't see it. Some children like to put a cross over the top. I prefer to do it actually on the word, otherwise I get confused, but children often do find what makes them feel comfortable. But the main strategy is look for the verb, find the person or the thing that's doing the verb, and then fill in around it. And please try to teach that is, am, was, are, were are verbs.
Thanks,
so perhaps
Lou.
you'd like to have a go.
I think it might be quite nice. Again, I will just apologise about the lettering on the screen. I'm afraid that that student who is obviously on the call has left. I'm unable to get in contact with them at the moment to remove the lettering. But yeah, I'm sorry that those letters are there. But hopefully you can still read, certainly still read 3 and 4, and maybe the ones underneath as well. But hopefully you've got them in your booklets anyway. I will just mention as well, one of the techniques for these is also to consider the tense that the sentence is written in, particularly with verbs and things like that, and they will often throw in.
Yes, you need to
oh,
swap.
I could hear someone working them out, which is lovely. Yeah, give those ones a go. And again, just having a go at these in your own time as well, having a play around with them. One of the ways that we often do think about these is to actually generate the sentences on separate pieces of paper, muddle them all up, give them to your child, and actually do it sort of physically and reorder them. I've seen that in process, and it looks good fun, just having an opportunity to talk about which words go where. And I think the other thing to be conscious of with these is that children need to recognize, well, an adjective, for example, often goes in front of a noun. So again, just looking at, well, how a sentence is constructed, how are they put together? Sentences often begin with pronouns. And in that example that we had at the beginning, she is obviously a pronoun. Do children know all of their pronouns? I think there's over 100 pronouns out there. So, you know, can children write down a long list of pronouns that they know? Often proper nouns are used as well, a name. So for example, when you get down to Matilda down here, I expect possibly that's the way of starting. You've got Aaron down here. Aaron probably starts it. Sam probably starts the sentence. I'm not saying that happens every time, but that can be a good lead into the sentence. Along with Louise's verbs, It's all about how can I get that sentence started in order to try and construct one. And the more they understand about sentence structure and how it's put together, the easier these questions are. And what I often
think they are actually a good test of grammar, these
They are,
sentences, because
yeah.
you know, some of the sentences that they are given can be quite complex. And I go back to my earlier statement about having two types of reading book, because you're going to get more complex sentences in more challenging reading books. That's what makes it a challenge.
Yeah.
And you learn to understand grammar really at its best by reading more complex stuff rather than just doing the grammar rules. Just reading will make you more understanding of how a sentence works.
Thanks, Lou. No, definitely. I think, you know, we all, I mean, you know, the whole thing around kind of the more you read, the more words you learn. And also, yeah, the more you understand how sentences are put together. Just to answer just a couple of questions within the chat before we move on. Someone said that their child actually underlines the words rather than crosses them out. And again, that might be a good way of doing it so you can still read it. Some children I know put dots above. Again, just making sure that it is directly above that word, just to make sure they don't get confused. There are different ways of doing it. I think the elimination, certainly in pencil, you can still read the word underneath. And also, of course, they've got the rubber as well. So they can rub it out and then sort of start the process again. I know that's a bit time consuming, hence why I think the sort of cross through again is a good way. But what works for your child, as long as they, you know, hopefully arriving at the right answer is a good idea. Someone's also said, where do we get the PDF document from? On Friday, we did email out to all the attendees, all the people who had signed up before Friday, a big PDF document on all the content that we're looking at this afternoon. If you didn't receive it, please just send an email through to the office. Sometimes they can arrive in your junk box. And so I'm not making excuses. If you haven't received it, we apologize and we will send it. But just to let you know, they do sometimes end up in junk boxes. So do double check that. But we will certainly tomorrow, when we're all back in the office, we will ping it over again if you haven't received it. But hopefully you're able to follow most of the things on the slides this afternoon. Just having a look down. Any other questions?
Can you further explain this one? Is that
this
sentences?
one? Yes. Yeah, no, cool. Of course we can. We can certainly go. I wonder whether, Lou, do you want to go through 3 and 4 with our parents, just to sort of show an example? So
again, I would identify the verb as either was or is. And then I think it's talking about Churchill, so it's probably was. So Churchill was, what was he? He was Prime Minister. Churchill was Prime Minister during the
not the, Lou, just during World
War II. During World War II.
Yeah.
No, was the Prime Minister during World War II.
Exactly.
And so you can see by spotting that there were 2 verbs, a past and present, you knew that it was one of those that was not going to be used. Okay.
I do often find that, don't we, with the verbs, that if they've got present or past, that we need to opt for one of those. So it's all about putting it into, and if they know a bit about Churchill, they'll know that.
There are also very good questions where, again, to use your instinct, sometimes before I teach these, I ask the children to just read through the 10 sentences and just have an instinctive guess at which word they think is the odd one out, just by reading the sentence as it is. And I generally find that it ranges between, some children get about 3, some can get as many as 6, even more correct, just going with their gut instinct. So if they run out of time at the end, it's worth them knowing that they can make a good guess.
Luke.
But yes, number 4.
Do you want to do number 4 and then we'll move
number
on?
4, I would say the verb is left, from the verb to leave. So who left what? So I'd say cavemen left. What did they leave? A legacy of drawings behind, and then fascinating would be a fascinating legacy of drawings behind, and then the odd word out is preserve.
Thanks, Lou. Sometimes it takes a little bit of trickery, doesn't it, to reorganize them, and you might find, and just as Louise has found on a couple of those, she might well be left with 2 words, and then it's all about, well, can we fit that word back in somewhere? Is it an adjective that describes something? And like we had on number 2, where Louise put back in Viking, because we could have Viking longships. wherever we try and put that superfluous word, it's still not going to work. It doesn't matter how much we try and rejig it, that word will not fit, it won't make sense. So I think that's important to realize as well. Okay, I think we'll move on to another question type now. So it is on to actually another one that I particularly enjoy doing, which is called Odd One Out. An odd one out is all about finding a word that is different from the rest. We often treat these slightly differently. In actual fact, rather than trying to find the one word that doesn't go with the rest of them, actually by grouping words together in sets and finding an association between those words often leaves the word that's not required. Odd ones out are very popular both in GL assessment. In actual fact, with GL assessment, it's often referred to as odd two out. So children are given 5 words and they have to find 2 words that don't belong. CEM tend to do it whereby they only have 1 word that's not required. Reading boys can draw upon this. This is one that they often use, odd one out. They do it slightly differently. They actually do it whereby they have something called opposites, but it's about finding the one word that is different from the other 4. So they call it opposites, but in my world, it's a bit more like odd one out. But again, the principles are generally very, very similar. So just to sort of show you an example of this type of question. So we can see at the top, we've got plateau, peak, summit, and top. So we're looking for the one word that is different from the rest. And as I said, I think it's probably easier for children to think about the words that maybe are linked together. So just looking at the word peak there, we know that a peak is the top. Now, interestingly, of course, we can talk a little bit about homophones here, and obviously peek as into to glance or sort of peek over something, then of course it has a different spelling. So it might be worth discussing that briefly with the child, but peak and top go together. So again, I can say, well, okay, they go together. What about summit? Well, I think of a summit of a mountain. If I've reached the summit, I've obviously reached the top. So there we've got the 3 words that we can group together, and then plateau, and it might be worth talking to children about something that plateaus, that levels off. You can have that discussion. Therefore, we know that that is the odd one out, and we can move swiftly on to the next question. One of the things that I think we should emphasize this afternoon, and Louise has mentioned it already, but this is one of those question types where a general knowledge, and Louise talked about being worldly earlier, that's really, really important. We do feel the 11 plus does test that a little bit. So if you think of animals young, for example, how many children know what a foal is? How many children may potentially know female and male animals, things like doe or stag? And again, just developing that general knowledge can really help with a question like this. I don't necessarily feel, for example, children need to go out there and learn all their capital cities, for example, but actually having a bit of a general overview of them, knowing the capital of France, capital of Germany, some other countries around the world, can also stand them in good stead, because actually we realize that this kind of knowledge shows that a child is either really well read, but actually they've just got a good understanding of what's going on around them. And this is one of those question types where I do feel, and I'm sure you'd agree with me, Lou, that actually knowing your herbs and spices, knowing your trees and your flowers can really, really help.
And I think it is what you said, if you just, it's both word aware and world aware. So that I would want to see, you know, I say to the children, I want to see you asking me questions about the world and asking other people questions on the world, not just keeping your interest to the things that you're interested in, you know, your play and your computers and your sports, but start looking occasionally at the world beyond that. So, you know, maybe there's a lovely children's newspaper. I can't remember the name of it. I don't know if you know it, Chris, but sharing that can open up a lot of conversations.
I absolutely agree, Lou. And actually, this is something that's sort of coming through the chat feed as well, is about sort of, you know, specific resources as well that can support things like odd ones out. And I think I will just jump in at this moment in time and just talk to you a little bit about some Lucky Gecko apps. So I'm going to fast forward to a slide pretty much near the end of our presentation, but I will just mention it here. So sorry, I don't know why that doesn't say Lucky. It should say Lucky Gecko. These are apps that we discovered quite a few years ago now that we really does help support vocabulary. And they have, as you can see here, one called Odd One Out. And what this is a series of questions which allow the child to choose the word that's the odd one out. And what they're given at the start is they're given 3 lives. And if they work through the questions and they get them right, of course, they keep those lives. If they get any wrong, then those lives disappear. But they have kind of 2 levels. There's an easy level and a hard level, and it's quite gamey. And actually getting as many points as you can, get 50 points for every right answer is really good fun, but also helps develop their word knowledge. What I also like about it is if they do ever get a question wrong, the algorithm, however it works it out, that question comes back in again. That's really nice. So if you are looking for a specific thing to really help with odd ones out and also have a big quantity of questions, because that's what it can be about sometimes, I would really recommend the Lucky Gecko apps. I'm afraid I don't think they're available on Android devices. I only think they're available on Apple devices, but fingers crossed you've got something Apple related at home that you are able to download those too. So sorry to sort of divert off what we were talking about, but just going back again to Odd One Out. A variation of this is Odd Two Out. And again, within GL assessment, this is how they would look. So if we look at this question here, question 15, pick, allow, let, choose, and select. So choose, select, and pick mean that allow and let would be our odd 2 out. And again, that process of grouping words together to leave me with the 2 words that don't belong. And someone's been very frank in the chat and actually said, my daughter actually finds this one of the hardest question types. And I can imagine that actually getting to the point where you've got 2 words left over or 1 word can be quite tricky. But it is all about practice. The more you do of these, just to let you know, within the back of your CGP book, so both for CM and GL, we've used the CGP books, the 9 to 10 ones. There are lots more examples of these types of questions that your child can work through. We won't actually use those tests. We'll be using our own in-house test in week 5, but certainly well worth you using those whenever you feel is appropriate for them to work through some of these different questions. Right, I'm actually going to move on now and let Louise talk to you about another question type here, which is called multiple meanings.
Okay, so here you have 2 sets of words in brackets. The first set here is world and globe, and the second 2 are soil and ground. Under that, you have 5 words, and from those 5 words, one of those words could go in either set of brackets. So you've got to have a think about it. Okay, the world, the globe, and soil and ground, and then look at each of the choices in turn. So you've got ball. So the world is a ball shape, globe is a ball shape, but I can't see ball having any connection really, any sort of meaning to go with soil and ground. So I would eliminate ball. When I go to dirt, yes, I might say you've got your hands, you've got soil on your hands, you put your hands on the ground and now you've got dirt on them from the ground. So I can see why dirt would go, but I can't see how dirt would relate in any way, in any meaning to world and globe. So I'd eliminate that. Plant, again, you can plant things in the soil and the ground, but I really don't see how that could go connect in any way with world and globe. The world and the globe can connect with universe, but not with soil and ground. So I'm left with earth. Yes, the world is often called earth, and the soil in the ground, we often call it earth. Go and plant it in some earth. So you have to have a good understanding of words to do these. And here are a few for you to have a go at. Use elimination. It's really, really important here. Think carefully about the words and eliminate as far as you can If not, we always say eliminate as far as you can, and that gives you a much better chance at a guess. If you've only got 2 words left, you've got a 50-50 chance. So have a go yourself.
Thanks, Lou.
It helps to put the words in sentences if you're stuck, I think. I think these are quite tricky for children.
We often talk, Louise, don't we, about it's all very well knowing the sort of obvious meaning of a word, but I always talk about of knowing the obscure. So it's kind of like, well,
Yeah.
if I take the word address, well, we all know that's where we live, but do we think about addressing the public as in
Exactly.
speak? But actually just getting your head around the fact that, well, so many words have a dual meaning and even more meanings than that. I think I can't remember where I read it, but I think something like the word time, one of the most used nouns in our English language, has got over 13 different meanings. And it,
Wow.
again, just about getting our getting our head used to think, well, actually, does this word mean something else? And being prepared to stop and think like that.
Yes, I think sometimes one of the hardest things when doing these questions is letting go of an idea.
Absolutely.
If you've got an idea of a word in your head and it's not working, letting go of it is tricky. So I often say to the children, move on so your brain can let go of it and go back to it.
Thanks, Lou. Shall
we
we
go?
just go? Yeah, I'm just a bit
Yes.
conscious of time.
Yes,
And parents, thank you so much again for coming along. I hope you are finding this sort of interesting. I think we realise that vocabulary is so important. Just to plug a little bit here, we do have 2 face-to-face workshops coming up the next 2 Saturdays. One in Reading on the 8th of October, one on the 15th of October in St Mary's Catholic Primary School, and we will be going through similar sort of thing here, really, in terms of going through questions, hopefully providing you with lots of suggestions, but also bringing along some games and activities as well for you to maybe sort of get your hands on more. So if you do want to join us for those, please just go onto the website and book your space. We will also be doing ones for non-verbal, for English, for maths. We also do one towards the end of the year, which we always find really valuable, on exam technique. And what we have done for the last few years is bring back our old pupils, and they come and talk to you about how they approach the exam, how they use the summer holidays, and they are so insightful. And I think certainly we always feel very proud, don't we, Lou, when those people come back and talk to us about how they got on and really celebrate their success, but also they are just so brilliant at sort of saying, well, this is what I did, this is the approaches I used, and tell us things about the actual exam itself.
Okay, so
Lou, when you're ready,
I'll go through the answers here. It's worth noting that grassland and flatland might be difficult for the children. They might not recognise prairie or plain as grassland. So I would say go to the second one, simple and obvious. And that will help you probably to eliminate prairie, to eliminate field. And I put it in a sentence. That's really simple. It's obvious. And then get to a point where you can eliminate, and then you they might realise that plain will do grassland and flatland. But again, it goes back to general knowledge, I think, a little bit of geography there. We never know what's going to pop up. Pit and quarry, bomb and explosive. A lot of related words like blast, but it doesn't really explain any of them, and missile. Then you've got mine, trench and ditch. A bomb or explosive could be with any of those, but pit and quarry is a mine. This one is really good because the answer is contract, or contract. So it's really important that the children understand this idea of emphasis and can see the difference between contract and contract as being emphasis, and that they practice that, otherwise they forget about it. Third one is reserve a table, to be reserved in personality. The next one is function. What's the use of that? What's the function of that? Or I'm going to a function, I'm going to a social. And the final one is ground. What grounds do you have for saying that? And I'm growing something in the ground. I think those are really quite tricky for children. And they really need to be putting them into sentences, I think, is probably the best.
One of the things we do provide for you during the year is actually a list of words that have a dual meaning or multiple meaning words. And again, we'll email you that over as a PDF document as well. Someone's saying they're struggling to find the Lucky Gecko apps. I will provide a link in a moment once I've gone through the next question type, but no, they should be available for you to get. Doesn't really matter where you are, you should be able to download those. I've recently downloaded them, so they should be available. Someone's asking whether those workshops that we do face to face will be available over Zoom. I'm sorry, but no, they won't be. They are only available face to face, those particular ones at Reading and at St Mary's, but you're more than welcome to come and join us in those locations. Okay, going to move on to verbal classification now. This is really more associated with CEM, a fairly new question type that they've brought in. The concept behind these is that children are given 3 words on the left-hand side, and they have to find the word that belongs with those 3 in the best possible way. Initially, it's all about understanding those 3 words. So of course, if we think about run, walk and stroll, they're all paces, and we're looking for a pace, a way of moving. So again, we can eliminate drive, ride, ski and sail, but of course sprint would belong in that group. What I find quite interesting about these 3 words on the left, they're not always synonyms. Sometimes they have a specific association or a specific link. So it might be that, I don't know, all 3 of them are liquids, for example. So it might have, I don't know, soup and broth and lemonade, for example. So again, has that child made the link between those 3 things, that they're all liquids, and they need to find a liquid that goes into that group? And I will re-emphasize what Louise and I have been saying all the way through. This is very much around general knowledge as well, that, you know, this is very much about having a really good grasp of what those words mean, how we put them together, what links words together, can we put words into groups, into sets, and things like knowing stones, for example. Do children know that emeralds are green, rubies are red? Again, that general knowledge can really support a question type like this. And again, yeah, I think with these kind of questions and the example down here, which actually the answer is meter, but not meter in terms of a meter stick or meter distance, but meter in terms of a musical term. So again, just having that knowledge, having that understanding is really, really important. Verbal classification is something that we teach within Teach It Right lessons. And again, children do get very familiar with this type of question. It didn't actually appear this year within the CEM exam, but it could do. And I think that's important to emphasize, just because something hasn't come up. And you know, friends have told you that things have come up in certain exams, that can change year on year. And I think that's important to realize. The examiners like to keep us on our toes in terms of what comes up. So we do move on to another really fun question type. This could be part of Reading Boys, could be part of GL assessment, less so within CEM. But again, I think those boundaries between question types belonging to a certain exam board are actually becoming a little bit more blurry. So I think for anyone who's within this workshop, it's certainly worth listening carefully to Louise's clues here.
Okay, I think these are quite fun. So in these sentences, there's a word in capitals. and it has had 3 letters taken out, and those 3 letters are next to each other, and those 3 letters will spell a word. So hence we were talking about needing to know 3-letter words as well. It'll be a correctly spelt word without changing the order. So here you've got the cat scratched him with his, and then the word that you're looking at has got CS. The answer is the 3-letter missing word is law, and you put it between the C and S and you have claws. The cat scratched him with his claws. Now there are several strategies for this. The first and a really important one is that the children listen to what the sentence is saying, because the sentence will give the clues. The cat scratched him with his. So before you even try to get the word, think, what does a cat use to scratch? Oh yes, he uses his claws. So you've got half of the answer already. It could be paws, although of course they probably wouldn't scratch, but it can't be paws because there's no C in paws. Then you've got to think, where are the missing letters going to come? If you don't know the answer, where are the missing letters going to come? Well, they're most likely going to come between the C and the S, because there's going to have to be a vowel somewhere. So you know that it's going to begin with C and probably end with S. So then you can try and fit it in and then write it as Chris has done. Write the C, then law, then S, and then cross out the letters that you were given and see if your word works. It's interesting again to notice that your best help is going to come from the answer paper. If you look at the answer paper, you've got 5 options: lad, law, had, raw, and red. And that avoids you having to think of loads of different words. You just try each of those 5. And if you had thought, well, yes, it's going to come in the middle of the CS, because I don't know many words that end with CS, begin with, certainly there wouldn't be any that began with CS. So you just try each of those 5 in the middle. Those strategies really help if you can't get it. I think this is obviously a pretty easy one. So we'll give you some and let's see how you fare with them.
Thanks, Lou. And I think probably just worth mentioning, we haven't really talked a huge amount about it today, but of course, with the 11+ exam, that it is a multiple choice test. And actually, the multiple choice sheet can be very, very useful for children to use the answer options to support them a little bit. But also, once they know what they're doing, certainly with things like odd ones out and closest to meaning, they can go directly to the multiple choice sheet and just do them straight on there, because actually that's a real time-saving tip, that rather than doing them on the question paper and then transferring their answers, they can do them directly. Now, they can't do that with every question type, but there certainly are quite a few where they can. Again, I'm quite conscious of time because we've only really got sort of 8 minutes left with you. So we will put these up just so you can have a look, but maybe we haven't got time to do all of them. So should we say first 5, Lou?
Yes, first 5.
First 5. So these ones here, guys, have a go at. You can
Think
either
of the
do them
sentence
in your booklet, or you can have a go on these. Some really good ones here, some quite good fun ones. And again, apologies about the lettering on the screen. I couldn't do a lot about it. The child obviously came on and then disappeared. I have worked out how to turn that off, so I learned from my mistakes.
Okay, should we quickly go through those, Chris?
Yeah, let's whiz through them, Lou. Really,
Okay, I think the first one is quite difficult. It would be useful to take a something sweatshirt. I because words do end in SE. It could be S with something in the middle. And
Do
it could
type them in the
also-
chat. So I think Lou as well. I'm just saying, yeah, oh yeah, someone's got it in the
Yes.
chat already.
So there you go.
As
It would
spare,
be
well
useful to take
done.
a spare par. So again, if the children
Great.
don't know the word par, it's tricky, but it would be on the option sheet.
Yeah.
So that's why that option is so important. What is the proof of that? Sorry, price of that.
yeah.
Price.
Interesting
So it's
one, that
price.
one, isn't it, Lou, actually?
Yes.
Because proof.
So I've just done what the children will often do, and then they'll swear that there is definitely a word called oof. They were asked to admit. No, it's not admit.
Not admit,
to-
actually.
No, it's not admit.
Amend.
Amend. Sorry, amend. And again, there it is, admit. But it wouldn't be there on the option sheet. The next one is.
Can I just say to everyone, this is just proof that Louise has been just sort of thrown these questions to do on the spot, guys. So well done, Lou, doing a good job. Oh, someone's come in with rid on number 4.
Yes,
Are they
the
right with
fridge.
rid? Yeah.
And monkey.
Well done. Just a point about the lettering. Of course, the 3 letters are always consecutive. They always have to be together. They're never separated out. So that's another thing that we would talk to the students about. And of course, monkey is the next one there. Number 6, you were lucky, guys. You got away with doing that one. It's always a tricky one, that one, isn't it? The mist in the valley looked like, and it isn't smoke, because obviously OKE is not a word, but of course steam with T in the middle.
But it's amazing how they will insist it's smoke, and there's a word called oak, and that's this idea of trying to let go. They have to practice letting go.
Yeah.
You can't cling on to an idea.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, and again, back to what we were saying earlier about that kind of trial and error. Have a go at it. It may not work. Try something else. And again, just giving them that sort of reassurance. There's nothing wrong with not seeing it straight away. You know, with children, they're very conscientious. They want to get it right. They want to prove to us, to you, that they're very clever and they can work things out. But if they don't get it right the first time, they must just, you know, keep trying, keep persevering, but also knowing when it's worth moving on if they can't identify the answer. And this is something that we as a tuition company will talk a lot to children about as we move through the year, about you know, building up their confidence, their reassurance that there will be questions that are a bit more difficult. We haven't got a lot of time, but I was just thinking number 7 there, rehearsed is not an easy word to spell.
And spelling as well.
And actually, getting that
And
right.
I was looking at number 11. They rode chestnut mares while on holiday. There's general knowledge again. You've got to know that a female horse is a mare.
Exactly. Yeah, tricky one. Anyway, we will move on. We could. Oh, someone's saying rehearsed and putting in scarf for number 9. Well done, all of you. No, lovely that you're giving these ones a go, and you're doing well. You're getting them right. And these are ones that you can have a little plod through on your own at home. So thank you for doing those. We will just move on now to another question type. And again, just want to get through as many as we can this afternoon. And the next one, again, one of my favorites. Do love this one. It's called Move a Letter. GL specific, really. If you're also going for an ISEB exam, if you ever do common pre-tests or anything like that, they love putting this one in as well. And the concept behind it is that children are given 2 words. One letter leaps from the first word into the second word and creates 2 new words. What can often happen is a letter can be removed, but it will only make 1 word and it won't make 2 new words. So children need to understand that they're making 2 new words, and of course it'll only be 1 letter that moves, that leaps away. We did talk a little bit earlier about having a good knowledge of little words and knowing those meanings. I think for this question type, this is where it really becomes quite important. Couple of clues here to the letter that's going to move. Words, pretty much all words in the English language contain vowels, apart from words like dry, cry, fry. But you could even sort of classify the Y as a vowel, can't you, sometimes? But most words will contain vowels. And often when words contain 2 vowels, it is worth the child looking very carefully at that, because often it is one of the vowels that will jump out. So just looking at this example here with pound and or, if I actually remove the O, no, that's not going to work. So I'll try the second vowel. If I remove the U, I get pond. And then if I put it in between O and R, I get hour. Now, again, what you will sometimes find is that a child's spelling is tested on a question like this. Are they good spellers? But of course, it's all about whether they know that word or not. And that's where we've seen children finding these questions quite difficult is, oh, they just didn't know that word. They've never come across that word before. So back to our, our first gambit right at the beginning, we want our children to be learning new words. The more words they learn, the more words they're able to get their head round and understand the meanings of, the easier these questions become. And I've got a couple of examples here. And again, I think what we'll do is just sort of share a couple of maybe the more sort of unusual ones, maybe. I'll look at number 7 actually first, the last one here, because I think this is probably the most challenging one of the lot. So we've got there and sake, and we've got to choose one letter from there that leaps out into sake. Now, what we'd always say to the children as well, it is worth starting with the first letter, because that could save time. You're sort of going to work your way through the letters until one works. If we were to remove the T, we would get heir. And of course, if you think of an heir to the throne, then of course that's a word, but where can the T go? And we're not always going to be fortunate enough for the letter to go at the beginning or the end. They don't always make it that easy. But of course, if we put it in there, we get stake. And this would, of course, be the stake that you would put into the ground, as in a pole that you would put into the ground. Again, does a child know that that's the word that we would use to apply to that? And again, we would have lots of discussions. And this is the great thing, I think, about our wonderful tutors at Teach It Right. They love talking about, oh, did you know what that word means? And have you ever come across that word? And it's all, all made to be, good fun in terms of that word building.
I think going back to the general knowledge here as well, Chris.
Yeah.
After the Queen's funeral and the next lesson, I said to some of the children in one of my classes, "Did you watch any of the Queen's funeral at all? Were you interested?" And they were like, "No, didn't." And that's fair enough. But I said, you didn't need to watch the whole thing. I understand that you weren't terribly interested in the whole thing, but if you'd watched just a little bit, you might have learned something about vocabulary that you might not have known, and they may have come across the word heir to the throne. So it's this grasping opportunities, you as parents seeing opportunities where you might just talk about a word or a concept, in an occasion. Just 10 or 15 minutes of watching it might have come up with quite a lot of vocabulary. You just never know where the vocabulary is going to come from.
Lou, I couldn't agree more. And just to sort of echo that statement, I think if you are looking at potentially maybe even independent schools as well, that we do a lot around independent schools and actually interview practice. And one of the questions that we know head teachers often ask children is, can you describe a recent news event, a news story? And they present them with that question, and the child is expected to talk about something that has recently occurred in the news. Now, for children, do they watch Newsround, for example, which is a really good program that just gives them an insight into what's happening in the world? There's a newspaper out there called First News, which I know is very popular in schools, that a lot of people do, or a lot of schools buy into, so children in the libraries and things have an opportunity to read. And it's just interesting, and as Louise says, it's trying to take those opportunities to actually learn these words and introduce them to that vocabulary, because just talking about question 7 there, and then the wider context is saying, well, if a child doesn't know the heir to the throne and hasn't seen that word or come across it, they are going to find a question like that difficult. So being worldly is important. We have gone over 6 o'clock. I am conscious that 2 hours to listen to us talking is a long time. I wonder whether you can just hold with us, perhaps just for 5 more minutes, because I would like Louise to give us a little bit of an insight into a specific code question, which is quite GL linked, actually. It's called double letter series. And it is, you do need to be aware that verbal reasoning in GL is not just about words. There are code questions, and we cover all of these within our syllabus. We also do number related questions. I don't think I'm quite going to have time today to run through number series with you. If you come and join us at St Mary's on the 15th, we will have a chance to get through all the GL question types on that day. But this one I think is worth just having a chat about, Lou, isn't it? Because actually
Yes.
having a knowledge of the alphabet, as much as we know how many letters there are, there's those 26 letters, it is a bit more in depth than that when you're doing something
I
like
also
a code
think
question.
that a lot of marks can be picked. Some children pick up a lot of marks on these questions. Really, practice makes perfect with these. Once you understand it, if you can get the speed, there's loads of marks to be picked up. So you've got a code, CQ, then DQ, then EP and FP, and you've got to work out the next one. The way to do it is to take the first letters. So C, D, E, F. So obviously your next first letter will be G. And that's using your knowledge of the alphabet going forward, obviously. And then the next one, QQ, PP. So we've got Q here and P, it's going backwards, so it's going to be O. And I would recommend that the children learn their alphabet off by heart, forwards and backwards. So they can not just say A, B, C, D, E, F, G right to the end. They can also say Z, Y, X, W, V right across the alphabet. But also, if I said to them M, I would like them to be able to go N, O, P, Q. If I said G, they could go straight away H, I, J, K. The same with going backwards. If I said W, they could say V, U, T, S, and so on. That really familiarity with the alphabet is what will bring speed. So it's first letter to first letter, second letter to second letter, and work out what the pattern is. Children often do these little hoops over the top and write down, that's an add one, that's an add one, and so on, which is great when they're learning. But the ones who really pick up the marks are the ones who know those alphabets back to front, practice loads of them, and they get speed.
Lou, thank you so much. And
yeah.
I will just mention actually about this, because I think it's really important that parents know that there are lots of variations to some of these question types. This is called double letter series. Sometimes it's called letter leaping. It's got various different names within books. It doesn't always called double letter series. I will just mention though, just while I mute someone there just for the moment, is that sometimes you can have mirrored letters, and this also creates a sequence. So for example, A goes with Z, B goes with Y, C goes with X, D goes with W, E goes with V, and we keep going until we get to M and N in the middle. And actually learning your mirrored alphabet is also an important skill, because we want children to recognize when the alphabet is mirrored. So for example, if I ever see H and S together, H and S are mirrored. And we get them to learn those. We help them out with little acronyms.
Harry Styles.
Harry Styles, happy squirrels, whatever works, whatever you can use to help you memorize them. I often do link it with animals. I think you can do angry zebras, batty yaks, catty x-rays, things like that. But again, just so that when a child is in the exam and that this comes up, and it did come up this year for GL assessment, a child knows the differences of that question type. The one that Lou obviously went through, examples like that, where you just go from first letter to first letter, second letter to second letter, quite common, quite easy generally to grasp, get right. You just got to make sure you're accurate with the counting. But knowing that you could get a variation, which could be mirrored letters, is an important part of the process. GL assessment has a numerous amounts of code questions, which we, as I said earlier, do cover within our syllabus. Unfortunately, today we haven't got time to go through every single one, but you know, these would be ones that we will cover off. And certainly, if you want to have a look through the rest of the booklet, and even if you want to ask us about any of these question types within the centres, please don't hesitate to ask. One of the things we do want to do today, and just really to finish off with, is just to round up by telling you a few games and activities, some of which we've highlighted through the workshop, but some we may not have. So just some games that you can use at home. A lovely game called Bananagrams. Christmas is coming. I always say I will never mention Christmas within September. It is October now, so I hope you forgive me for that. But a lovely little game. It's a bit like Scrabble, and you know my connections with Scrabble. And the idea is you take out 21 letters and you have to join words together. If you can't use a letter, you dump it back in the banana and you pick 3 more. Really good fun. One of the most popular word games in the world now, Bananagrams, really good fun. We did talk about pencil and paper, and Lou's absolutely right. It doesn't have to be you going out and spending a lot of money on lovely games and things. You can always do lots of fun games like word wheels, words from words. This is a good fun way of doing it. Perseverance, making as many words from that as you can. These little categories down the bottom are good fun as well, just to see how far your child can get. I did mention whiz cards earlier. These can be purchased off Amazon. There is whiz synonyms, whiz opposites. A lovely game called Flip It, which I only stumbled across a few years ago. Someone recommended it to us, and really good fun. Kids get to make this sort of contraption and they flip the cards and the next one sort of automatically drops down. It's really good fun. So one for you to consider. Collins do some wonderful flashcards. You might feel this isn't quite the right moment to start doing lots of flashcards, but when you maybe get round to the summer or the Easter period, this can be a great place to start introducing them, particularly if you go away on holiday, just getting some flashcards going. And these are great fun. They do lots of questions. A lot of the questions we've mentioned today, there's double meaning that Lou was talking about earlier, with all the answers explained on the back, which is really important. We'll just mention our Teach It Right books. These are all CEM. Louise has had a huge involvement with a lot of our books, and actually we've got a new series coming out in January for GL assessment. Do look out for those. A lot of them we feed into the course, so you won't need to go out and buy them. They're part of our course structure, but we're always looking at ways of developing our content. So hopefully you'll find those books really, really unique, and we might even be able to get them into the course before they start coming out on the sort of public market, really. Mary Farquhar's flashcards, another really good resource. We know Mary well, and Mary actually contacts us every year, asks us about words that have come up potentially in exams, and we sort of feed them back into her. And I know a lot of people she associates herself with do exactly the same, and give her lots of words to add in. So Mary Farquhar, she may well be someone who may come into the centres as well and see you personally. So look out for her cards. Talked about Lucky Gecko apps. I'm sorry if that odd one out didn't quite work for you. I will have a look into that. Someone did mention it within the chat that they couldn't get that one, but I will look into that myself. It sounds like you found synonyms, antonyms, but not odd ones out. Leave that one with me. I may even be able to contact them and see what the situation is with that one. So sorry if you weren't able to get it. Free rice comes up a lot, Lou, doesn't it? I don't know if
I
this
like
is a
free
website.
rice.
Yeah, good fun. It's quite novel. Every time a child gets one right, they get I think it's 100 grains of rice or 10 grains of rice, I can't remember which one, and it fills up their bowl, and they really love doing it, and they move through a series of levels, and yeah, really great fun, particularly for closest in meaning. Really good. So www.freerice.com. I will put that into the chat for everybody, because it's a really good website, that one, and I know my sons use that one quite a bit. Really good fun to use. So there you go. We will provide this probably in a little bit more depth, but just to sort of let you know some of the question types, the timings on the exam that's just been. I will just mention again that exams can change. It just because it happened one year doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same next year. But I think one thing we wanted to point out here, and if we look at word choice, which was synonyms, 6 minutes, 28 questions. So that choice has to be fairly quick and not too laboured. You want them to be accurate. We don't want them rushing, but we're just sort of emphasizing how many questions in quite a short period of time. And I think that's also emphasized with the reshuffled sentences in the end of paper 2 there. 7 minutes, 30 seconds, 16 questions. That is less than 30 seconds, just under 30 seconds per question. And I know reshuffled sentences today was one of those questions that somebody said, oh, this is quite tricky. My child finds that hard. So again, that's all about practice and rehearsal of that particular one. The other sections, things like comprehension, non-verbal and maths, we will talk more about in kind of future workshops. Obviously, the focus today has been very much on verbal reasoning. Just to mention as well, just if you are looking for other things to support your child's 11+ journey, in October half term, we do have a creative writing course, which is open to all of Key Stage 2 in terms of year 4 up to year 6, and to support children with their writing, particularly if you have a child going for Reading Boys. We obviously cover that within our centres at St Joseph's and Camberley. But if you are in a different centre and you need that support with writing, you can join us over half term for 3 days. And Josephine Allen, one of our very experienced English teachers, works with the children in a lot of depth in terms of working on not only their writing skills, but things like time management. Reading Boys this year, 15 minutes to produce a real quality piece of prose. That isn't long, that does need practice, that does need working on. So if you want to join us in our creative writing camp over half term, October half term, we do have some spaces still available. Can I end by thanking Louise Swan hugely for today? You probably didn't realise this, but I saw Louise at 8:30 this morning in Gerrards Cross. She then taught for a long time up until 12:30. Her day didn't finish. She rushed home. She then had to do a book club, which she always extends beyond the time she's meant to. And then she came on and joined me and reminded me that I needed to be on this call at 4 o'clock. We're now at 6:15. She's probably still got far more energy than most of us here. And thank you very much, Lou, for your insight and your wealth of knowledge on word building. Can I just give you the last words in terms of building vocabulary and what you see to be the most important thing?
I think the most important thing is making it a family thing where everybody tries to love words for the year and hopefully beyond. But start thinking, what word can I use? Thrown it in. Whoa, that's a good word. So it almost becomes just a fun thing that we do. We use good words, and I think you'll be amazed at the results. Actually, you'll be amazed at what you pull out of your own sack, and you'll be amazed at what the children pick up. And I do say to the children that words give you power. They quite like that.
Thanks, Lou. And I think you're absolutely right. I think words do give you power, and I think it's a good way to end. Parents, can I thank you very much for your time and your enthusiasm with having a go at lots of those questions this afternoon. We have recorded this, so this will be something we'll send out as a link if you want to rewatch it. Please do join us for future workshops. We'll have a lot as we go through this academic year. But again, thank you for your support and hope you enjoy the rest of your Sundays. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks very
Bye-bye.
much.